Let's talk about something that's almost invisible when you're growing up, but runs your entire adult nervous system and life. And that is what happens when no one teaches your body what safety feels like. I'm Jenna. I'm a clinical and molecular neuroscientist and a licensed therapist. I study how your brain and body communicate through stress and immune signals and how those conversations shape your physical and mental health. Because the biggest lie that we've ever been told is that the mind and the body are separate. So I teach you how to reset this brain-body dialogue to reclaim calm, clarity, and lasting vitality. And for some of you to experience that for the first time because you never have because of trauma, without spending years or hundreds of thousands of dollars on treatments that don't work, or spending years and hundreds of thousands of dollars talking about it to no avail, which doesn't work in complex trauma because it doesn't access the right brain regions. It helps to some degree, but it's not very effective based on the brain differences in complex PTSD brain, okay? So follow along if you want to learn the science behind rewiring your brain and body from the cellular level up to your daily behavior so that you can finally see shifts in the struggles that you face every day. This week, we are reviewing this article called The Role of Affective Touch in Mental Illness. It's a systematic review of C tactile fiber dysregulation in psychological disorders and the therapeutic potential of C tactile fiber stimulation this is by Pappy et al., just published in March of 2025. If you grew up in a house where affection was unpredictable, maybe your parent was loving one minute and emotionally out of control the next, or maybe they rarely looked at you or treated you with warmth, your nervous system was wired for threat detection instead of safety detection. And that difference might seem small, but in brain architecture and in psychoneuroimmunology, which is the way that your body responds to stress and immune signals and how that affects your brain, that difference is massive. Neglect creates massive problems for people. And in this systematic review by Pappy and colleagues in Frontiers in Psychiatry, they pulled together over 40 studies and ended up with 19 of them that examined how gentle, soothing touch, technically called affective touch, is a strong component of building the neural basis of self-regulation. So what they found is that across almost every major psychiatric condition, PTSD, major depression, borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, and even some forms of eating disorders, there's a shared mechanism, which is a breakdown in the brain's reception or the way that the C tactile fibers are responding or communicating with the brain and the brain's sort of integration of that. So CT fibers are fascinating. They're a specific kind of sensory nerve underneath your skin that transmit information from slow, gentle touch, like a slow, gentle caress at a light to medium pressure. And they connect to a region called the insula. The insula and its partners in the brain, like the anterior cingulate and the orbitofrontal cortex, are responsible for the feeling states of safety. It's like that warm exhale from your chest feeling when you're being held or rocked, if that feels safe for you. Now, again, some of you with trauma will not feel that feels good, okay? And there's a reason why. We're going to talk about that. The insula integrates interoceptive and emotional signals, giving rise to bodily feelings of your internal state. And the anterior cingulate cortex tracks motivational salience and links interoceptive input to emotion regulation. So it's really important in terms of how day-to-day basis. The orbitofrontal cortex encodes reward value and contributes to positive affect and safety learning. Together, these networks constitute the neural architecture of subjective safety and emotional comfort. When we talked about that warm, deep exhale from your chest, it's like my nervous system is releasing some things. What happens if you don't get that kind of input as a child is the insula underdevelops. It doesn't, and the way that it connects to other vital brain regions can also be over or underexpressed, depending on the psychological suffering one is experiencing. So the brain literally doesn't build enough neural representation of soothing here. Instead, the amygdala and the salience network, the brain's internal alarm, take the lead. If you've seen my previous videos on the way that stress and trauma disrupt the brain-body connection, you know that the subcortical parts of the brain are hijacking the neocortex and the upper parts of the brain that are there for critical thought and higher order thinking and things like that, and executive functioning. So when you get those subcortical parts of the brain functioning better, you're going to feel better. Your brain will literally work better because it's not being hijacked. In the case of dissociative processes, the neocortex is overmodulating the subcortical parts of the brain where somebody's really disconnected from their bodies, and this is also not healthy. A lot of the population is walking around dissociating. There's lots of forms of socially acceptable dissociation, like scrolling on your phone and playing video games where, it's connected to yourself, and those are normal. They're dissociative and have dissociative qualities. Typically, the research about video games is usually coming from video game companies, so take that with a grain of salt. These parts of the brain then become over or underdeveloped and are compensating for the lack of sensory safety. There's another 2025 paper by Tanaka and Mioa called The Influence of Affective Touch on Interoceptive and Exteroceptive Sensory Integration in Infants. And they showed that through EEGs and ECGs that caregiver stroking of the child enhances heartbeat-evoked potentials, or HEPs, in infants. So what that means is if you hook somebody up to an EEG or an ECG and then you touch them, these heartbeat-evoked potentials are a brain response to a heartbeat measured using an EEG or an electroencephalogram. These HEPs reflect how the brain processes signals from the heart, and it's thought to be a marker for internal bodily awareness or interoception. Okay, so they're getting basically signals in the brain every time the heart is beating. That's what this value is. It's sensitive to attention, and it changes in respiratory cycles, and its amplitude increases during tasks that require paying attention to internal bodily signals such as heartbeat counting. This is fascinating because when I train people in interoception, they get better at these things. They get better at tracking their respiration. They get better at tracking their heartbeat. They get better at tracking interoceptive signals in general. And so we can effectively say that's going to be increasing these heartbeat-evoked potentials, which is a sign of health. In the Tanaka and Mioa paper, they found that the stroking of infants really helped the children. And then going back to this Papi et al. Paper, they found that in PTSD, the CT fibers don't just shut down, they basically misfire. The touch can feel really bad. It can make people dissociate. They can want to get away from it. And the brain is basically trying to defend itself from a sensation that it never learned was safe. And I would postulate that yes, in PTSD, because PTSD and complex PTSD are in many ways sensory disorders, this is not at all surprising. People are more likely to develop PTSD in adulthood from a single event trauma when they have unresolved childhood trauma or childhood stress and adversities. When you were nourished and supported neurobiologically through touch, through social engagement, you are going to develop much greater resilience to stress, and you're less likely to develop PTSD as an adult if you go through something stressful. This is incredibly important. So in depression, the inflows responsiveness flattens. You can still feel pain, but the pleasure doesn't really register. This is what we would call anhedonia. We also need to work through this. I've seen people in my clinical practice time and time again move through depressive symptoms through interoceptive work. I wasn't hooking them up to EEGs, but I've seen many times where people's depressive symptoms started to vastly improve because they were more in their bodies. It has to be done in a safe way and supervised by someone who's very trained in interoceptive work. It's not the same thing as meditation. It's not just body scanning. It's a lot more than that. I can't stress that enough. Start to scan your body, but the person needs to be directing the attention to various internal cues they sense, because people often do this wrong, or they're doing it in a way that's keeping them stuck, or they're doing it in a way that needs to shift in order for them to feel better. So a lot of times that interoceptive work has to be done. You have some initial practices that you can learn, but eventually it needs to be done in the context of supervised work with somebody. I work with people in my groups primarily. If you want neuroscience-backed coaching, I offer groups where I'm doing live work with the best place to do that is in the membership. You'll learn more about those practices in my course below, Healing from Complex PTSD Holistically. You really have to practice these things. It's not just one and done. Okay, so let's get back to this piece here. I'm going to put the rest of it into the neuroscience deep dive that's available for paid Substack subscribers. I'll put the Substack link below if you want to go into the deep dive. Yes, this is just the beginning of it. Just to wrap up here, this is what emotional neglect does at a cellular level. It teaches your body that sensation equals danger. I can't tell you how often I hear this from people who have unresolved childhood trauma, is that starting to feel their body can feel really weird and feel unsafe and feel stressful. And so again, it's really important that you're doing these with support. It's not something that you're doing just on your own, especially if you have a lot of trauma. You need help with this. It's okay. It's normal to need help, and you need to be doing this in a safe way. If you grew up learning to self-regulate through control, it's not true regulation, through productivity, through isolation, these things are not actually regulating you. These are overt behaviors that are just trauma responses that people take on as their personality. But I can't tell you the number of times that people start to heal from these things and they realize that a lot of what they thought was their personality was just a trauma response. And I'm laughing because I've been one of those people. I've worked through a lot of those things myself. I was like, oh, I thought that was who I was. It's not necessarily. I chuckle about that because it takes one to know one. When these CT fibers aren't adequately stimulated in early life, the mapping between interoception and emotion becomes fuzzy as well. The brain can't really tell, like, I'm lonely from I'm in danger from I'm hungry. This is one reason why people tend to binge eat. With binge eating, there's a large dissociative process happening. People are feeling lonely. They struggle to interocept, track their sensation in their bodies, and they're using food to cope. And it's just another strategy. It's just like any other coping skill or coping strategy is, whether it's overeating, undereating, alcohol, whatever the thing is, video games, whatever the thing is that they're using to dissociate from their experience. It's all similar in terms of these are surface level behaviors that indicate dysregulation of the nervous system, okay? This dysregulation of affective touch processing appears to weaken that integration between interoceptive and exteroceptive signaling between the internal sensations and external feedback that the body's getting from the outside world. And this is a major piece that I teach people, is how to balance those internal and external signals so that they're not so overwhelmed by either one, okay? This is really, in many ways, interoceptive training, when done well, is really about, it's attentional training. It's training your attention like a flashlight in your body is how I like to explain it to kids and basically everybody is. You have a flashlight in your body that you're shining in different spots. And I know that you always want to focus on this sensation or that you don't feel any sensation. What if you moved your flashlight somewhere else? We start to see changes based on how people respond to that. The nervous system regulation is the next status symbol. It's a luxury for those of us who grew up deprived of safety, deprived of contact. Calm is not natural. It doesn't feel normal. It's a foreign language that you can learn, but it has to come from the body first. The brain is plastic. It means it can change. These CT fibers are also reprogrammable. You can change the way you're responding to them. And safety can ultimately, in most cases, be cultivated much like a muscle. In my course, we're starting to retrain those neural circuits and give you a ton of science in that. It's just so thorough. And then I start to teach you what needs to be done. It's not going to rewire these touch fibers that are unmyelinated, that are slow. The link is below if you're ready to teach your nervous system what safety really feels. I'm going to go into the deep dive next, and that you can access through this post on Substack. Both videos will be on Substack, and the part 2 deep dive will be available for paid Substack subscribers. I'll see you there. Bye.